Yo, whether you've been playing Clash Royale since day one or you just picked up the game recently, there's at least one update that made you stop and say, yeah, this isn't it. Clash Royale didn't fall apart overnight. There wasn't a single update that instantly ruined the game. Instead, it was a slow shift, a series of decisions that gradually changed what Clash Royale felt like to play. And I know some of you watching are newer players, so today we're rewinding the clock and breaking down the most polarizing updates from the last few years, starting in 2021 and leading all the way to where we are now. And by the end of this video, I'll tell you exactly which update I think did the most long-term damage to the game, and why I would stop it instantly if I had a time machine. But before we get there, think about this while you watch. When did Clash Royale stop feeling fair to you? To understand how we got here, we have to start with the update that cracked the door open for everything else. The first major turning point was in 2021 when Supercell introduced Champions. At the time, Champions sounded amazing. A new rarity, unique abilities, cards that could completely change how a match played out. And to be fair, at first they were exciting. But Champions also introduced something Clash Royale had never really dealt with before, ability-based gimmicks that were extremely hard to balance. Instead of focusing on placement, timing, and elixir trades, games started revolving around pressing abilities at the perfect moment. One misclick, one late reaction, and the entire match could swing instantly. Champions didn't just add depth, they added inconsistency. Suddenly, decks weren't built around synergy anymore. They were built around one overpowered card that everything else supported. And this is important to understand. Champions didn't completely ruin the game on their own. The game was still playable, still competitive, still fun for a lot of people, but they did something far more dangerous. They normalized the idea that Clash Royale cards could have special mechanics that straight up break the traditional rules of the game. Once that door was open, it was never going to fully close, because after Champions, the question wasn't if more gimmicks were coming, it was how far Supercell was willing to go. And unfortunately, the next major update answered that question pretty clearly. Then came 2023, and this is where everything truly went wrong, where card evolutions got introduced. For the first time in Clash Royale, certain cards weren't just better, they were required. If you didn't have the right evolutions, you were already losing. Champions were strong, but you could still outplay them. Card evolutions turned the game into a checklist. Every deck slowly revolved around them, not because players loved them, but because they had no choice. And then there was Evo Mega Knight, a card that already jumped, splashed, and punished mistakes somehow got evolved. You don't outplay Evo Mega Knight, you survive it. It's the perfect example of why evolutions felt overwhelming instead of strategic. More importantly, card evolutions changed expectations. Players stopped pushing back and started accepting imbalance. And once that happened, every update that followed became much easier to justify. Not long after card evolutions, Supercell introduced level 15, and this update didn't add anything new to gameplay, and no new mechanics, no new strategies, just higher numbers. For a lot of players, this is where frustration really turned into exhaustion, because grinding to max your deck already took months, sometimes years, and suddenly the finish line moved again. Level 15 didn't make the game more fun. It didn't make it more competitive. It just made progression feel endless. It felt like running a marathon, only to be told the race isn't over, it's just getting longer. And by this point, many players didn't even get angry anymore. They were just tired, which honestly might be worse. At the start of 2024, Supercell introduced the Tower Troops. And this update was strange because it didn't really fix anything, it didn't solve balance issues, it didn't improve progression, and it didn't meaningfully deepen strategy. Most of the time, Tower Troops barely change how a match plays out. You select one, the game starts, and after a few matches, you almost forget they're even there. That's what made this update feel so hollow. It wasn't overpowered, it wasn't exciting, it was just unnecessary. And the reaction to Tower Troops was telling. There wasn't massive outrage, not because players loved the idea, but because players had already gotten used to game-altering updates. By this point, expectations were low. Players weren't surprised anymore. They just accepted it and moved on. And that acceptance is exactly why the next updates were even possible. And fast forward to the end of 2025, and we get the announcement of Heroes and level 16. And at this point, none of it felt shocking anymore. New powerful units with special mechanics. Another level added to the grind. If this had been announced years earlier, the backlash would have been insane. But now, a lot of players just sighed and accepted it, and that's the real problem. Updates like card evolutions trained the player base to tolerate massive changes, even when those changes clearly favored spending over skill. Once that mindset settled in, it became much easier for Supercell to push things further. Heroes and level 16 didn't come out of nowhere. they were the result of years of players slowly being conditioned to say, well, I guess this is just how the game is now. And that might be the most damaging update of all. Not a single feature, but the loss of pushback. Now, if I had a time machine, I'd go back to 2023 and stop card evolutions. Not because every update after that was perfect or terrible on its own, but because card evolutions changed what players were willing to accept. They normalized pay-to-win mechanics, extreme power creep, and the idea that every deck needs specific upgrades just to compete. Once that line was crossed, higher levels, new gimmicks, and more grinding became much easier to justify. That's why, for me, card evolutions were the worst update in Clash Royale history. Now I want to hear from you, so if you could erase one Clash Royale update, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments.